Tributes continue to pour in for the human rights lawyer George Bizos, who died yesterday, aged 92. In a past interview with the SABC, he talked about starting working as an advocate with Nelson Mandela and Oliver Tambo.
Being an advocate, I couldn't take work directly. Mandela and Tambo was one of the firms that gave me a lot of work, not for large fees, sometimes even for no fee at all, but they had clients from throughout the country. It was a time when there was awakening of what was later called black consciousness. I don't subscribe to the view that black consciousness came to the fore in the 70s. These were real heroes of black consciousness, and for a black person who was accused of a crime, particularly of a political or quasi-political nature, it was a great pleasure for people to be defended by Mandela or Tambo, or by young, mainly white advocates such as myself, who were briefed by Mandela and Tambo, because if we were trusted by Mandela and Tambo, we would be trusted by the clients.
That's the late Advocate George Bizos. To talk more about his life and work, we're joined now by Warwick Taylor, who's the Executive Headmaster at Saheti School. Thank you so much for speaking to us, and our condolences to you and all who knew Advocate George Bizos. Let's first start talking about the last time you saw him. What was the conversation?
Conversation was really around his birthday. I remember him sharing a favorite poem of his by the Nobel Literature Laureate George Bizos, which speaks to a culture within our school, working towards a little more than where we were yesterday. And he would often quote that poem. So in terms of who he was, he engaged with people. He was a super individual, superhuman being in terms of his passion for life and doing what is right at the expense of personal costs sometimes as well.
So he was amongst the founders of Saheti School in 1974. Tell us a bit about the history behind that. Why was that important to him?
It was so important to him because it spoke to his belief in lifelong learning and his passion to gain wisdom and knowledge. And when we talk of Hellenic values, those are values that are universal, deep-seated within our culture. And certainly a love of learning was central to who Advocate Bizos was. He drove education all the way through. It was about his people and knowing who where his origins were, and really sharing that with the broader community. Certainly not something that he kept just for himself, but drew in others at any point. Many times people ask, how many Greek students do we have at Saheti? And he would answer, how many students do we have? And then the answer would come, 1,300 students. Advocate Bizos would say, we have that number of Greek students because they partake of the Greek culture.
And I want to talk a little bit more about that, his origins. Tell us about his parents, how they came here, and how he related to that, the amalgamation of Greek culture and now being in South Africa in particular, and embracing that.
Well, the Greek culture has at its core democracy, and certainly brought that to this country through his community and culture. He came to South Africa as an immigrant and as a refugee. And in his experience here, he assimilated into our culture and studied, did his best, and developed his skills to be able to go on and become the person he became, making a difference in the nation as somebody from an outside of the South African nation, being able to assimilate but also absorb the best of both, and ultimately in those values that are human values that go across culture. And he drew in people, and in his passion for life, and his relationship with people. There are many times where he would stop and spend time speaking to students and engaging. He always had time for a personal discussion.
And I want to talk about that, the kind of values and principles that he wanted to imbue, especially to those who were at Saheti School, in line with the Hellenic culture, what he felt was important about it. You said at the core of it is the notion of democracy. We saw that play out in his life and the causes that he fought for.
Central to the thinking is a liberal education, one that would challenge thinking, that wouldn't accept the status quo. And certainly our students are encouraged to question, to ask, to listen, but also to make a difference and to stand up for what they believe. So there's an aspect of knowing oneself, which is one of our school mottos, know thyself. And at the core of that is an ability to speak with confidence, to challenge, to question, and to listen, and to respect. So that certainly came through in his life and his involvement at the school. He was a familiar face around the campus. He's participated in our board meetings as an honorary member right up until the middle of 2018, where his mobility, due to health, started causing him not to attend as often. But that belief system of his certainly came through in all that is represented at our school too.
Let's talk about young people and their role in not only advancing the Greek culture, but also placing it firmly within the theme of access to education. Saheti School itself, well known for academic excellence. What role did he see the youth playing in advancing this? Because knowing the history of South Africa, education is something that not a lot of the majority of people could take for granted because they didn't really have access to quality education.
Yes, so Advocate Bizo certainly drove an inclusive environment at Saheti from the very onset of the foundation of the school. He insisted that it was not going to be a school just for Greek students, because that was to become, or would be quite exclusive. He drew in people from a diverse background and encouraged that. And driving the educational system in a liberal way, but in one that has true values of respect, valuing of each other, and equity. Certainly was the foundation of many of the many of the conversations that he had with students when he spoke at assemblies and celebration days too.
Thank you so much for speaking to us once again, the Executive Headmaster at Saheti School, Warwick Taylor.